There is a sense in which much has been said. If it is the history of the continent, slavery that has been mentioned, if it is colonization that has been spoken to, if it is neo-colonization that has been spoken to, if it is in describing the continent of Africa as having been divided so very arbitrarily in Berlin in 1884 and 1885, that has been spoken to. And we have been told so very correctly how that continues to bedevil the continent of Africa and to undermine her attempts at unity. Those of you who are students of history will remember that in 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and in 1964 in Cairo, Egypt, the debate was, should we redraw the boundaries? It was agreed by the founding fathers then that that would be an exercise in fueling conflict, and that if we were moving towards unity, then redrawing boundaries was unnecessary. The OAU was, of course, founded in 1963, a weak organization which, as it were, introduced the concept of inviolability of boundaries and placed emphasis on sovereignty. We have been told that that could very well be the reason why Africa's growth has been stunted. But Africa sometimes judges ourselves very harshly and with a jaundiced sense of history. The post-colonial African state, the oldest post-colonial African state is Ghana, 66 years only. Nigeria, 63 years only. And we often forget these very important and immortal words of John Henry Clark when he said that all African countries, upon regaining independence, started to conduct their affairs on the basis of systems of governments that were borrowed from Europe, and that none of them will ever succeed on the basis of borrowed systems. And as if he were a Jewish prophet, he is being proven right on a daily basis. Because whenever we in the African countries think that we have identified the problem and that we have identified the antidote, when we apply the antidote, new wounds appear. That has been the state of Africa, and that continues to be our state. And therefore, when we judge Africa, we must ask ourselves, from whose lens are we judging Africa? When in 1965, the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah wrote the book, Neo-Colonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism, and the Most Dangerous, he was right, and he was overthrown for it. Because the colonizer left but never left. And if you have any doubt, see what is happening in Niger, in Guinea, in Burkina Faso, in Mali. They are alive and well. And Africa remains the only continent in the world that is still referred to as Francophone, Anglophone, Lusophone, and now we are beginning to even call it Russophone and Sinophone and Indophone. There is a sense in which we must never forget this, so that when we are judging Africa, we ought to judge her on the basis and upon the realization that the headwinds that stand on her path are numerous, and that there is no shortage of fifth columnists within our ranks. The SMO spoke, and if the SMO were to speak a little longer, he would have reminded you of what Chinua Achebe said in Things Fall Apart, that they came and put the things that held us together, and we can no longer reason as one. And he said, we may have sent the white man away, but what about our brothers whose minds they have infected and infested? And there is no shortage of them. So Africa can and will arise. And if you look at the continent of Africa, she has always been conscious of the need to do right things. And if you look at the continent since 1963, and I can remember this so very vividly, I can remember Kwame Nkrumah in 1957 on the 6th of March saying, the freedom of Ghana means nothing if the rest of Africa is not free. He says the same thing in 1958. He repeats the same thing in 1960 in Casablanca, Morocco. He repeats it again on 25th of May, 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where he tells the 32 heads of states gathered there, we must live here with one army. We must live here with one currency. We must live here with one foreign policy coordinated. And I even suggest that we can have a capital, and I suggest Bangui in Central African Republic because it is the most central. But we listen to him not. After that, of course, we have had our gains. Under the aegis of the OAU, Africa was able to eliminate apartheid South Africa. Under the aegis of the OAU, Africa was able to chase away the Portuguese in Cabo Verde, in Angola, in Mozambique, in Guinea-Bissau. Under the aegis of the OAU, Africa was able to chase away the apartheid regime in what is now Namibia and the Ian Smith regime in what is now Zimbabwe. Let us not judge ourselves too harshly. We have made our mistakes, but sometimes it is proper, as my sister said, that we see half full glass rather than half empty. We must not debilitate ourselves by constantly bashing ourselves and looking at Africa from jaundiced eyes from Europe and America.